Welcome to this explainer. Look, if you're a small business owner who relies on international trade to get products onto shelves, you already know the stakes are incredibly high. The journey your products take across the ocean is packed with logistical hurdles. But honestly, what's even more daunting is the complex web of legalities governing that trip. Today, we're demystifying ocean freight law. We are going to translate these incredibly dense, sometimes centuries-old maritime laws into a practical, actionable survival guide for your business.
Picture this for a second. Imagine your absolute most valuable shipment. Maybe it's a container totally packed with high-end electronics or dozens of pallets of custom-made apparel. Now imagine it floating halfway across the world, completely out of your physical control. Makes you a little nervous, right? If a massive storm hits, if a fire breaks out on board, or if the cargo literally just goes missing. Who is actually responsible for it? The harsh financial reality of global supply chains is that a single misunderstanding about your maritime contracts could easily wipe out your entire profit margin for the year. Okay, let's dive into this. We'll be walking through 6 key steps today. 1. Sea shipping contracts explained. 2. The Global Maritime Rulebook. 3. Expecting a seaworthy vessel. 4. When carriers escape liability. 5. Navigating frauds and disasters. And finally, number 6, passenger rules and a quick summary. Right, let's kick things off with Section 1, Sea Shipping Contracts Explained, where we translate the paperwork. Because every safe and profitable journey doesn't start at the dock, it starts with a solid agreement.
Okay, so you're going to see a highly intimidating term thrown around a lot, the contract of affreightment. It sounds like something straight out of an old Victorian novel, doesn't it? Actually, scratch that. It just sounds like a lawyer's playground. But let's break it down into plain, everyday English for your business. A contract of affreightment is simply your overarching freight agreement. That's the core contract where a carrier agrees to carry your specific goods across the sea. And in exchange, you agree to pay them a sum of money, which we call freight. That is really the whole shebang. It's the foundational handshake of global trade.
Now, what's super interesting is how that contract of affreightment changes depending on the size of your operation. If you're moving a massive amount of cargo, you'd probably use a charter party. Just think of a charter party like leasing an entire delivery truck, or, well, the whole ship. On the flip side, if you just have a few pallets, you'll be dealing with a bill of lading. A bill of lading is essentially your tracking receipt. It's the legal evidence of your contract to move just a single package or container on a shared ship. So it's really all about the difference in scale and your level of liability. But let's say your business is large enough that you're leasing the whole ship under a charter party. Well, you've got a major risk decision to make. You can choose a demise charter, which means you literally take control of the bare ship. You have to provide your own captain and your own crew. You take on almost all the liability. Or you can go with a non-demise charter where the ship owner provides the vessel fully staffed with their own crew for a specific voyage or a set time frame. It really just comes down to how much operational risk you're willing to absorb. Moving right along to Section 2, the Global Maritime Rulebook, looking at decades of international law. Because the second your goods leave territorial waters, you're in the Wild West of international territory.
So let's take a quick look at how this rulebook actually evolved. It definitely didn't happen overnight. It all started way back in 1924 with the Hague Rules, establishing the basic minimum responsibilities for ocean carriers. Fast forward to 1968, modern shipping needed an upgrade, so we got the Hague-Visby Rules. Then, trying to shift a bit more balance toward the shipper, the Hamburg Rules were introduced in 1978 and actually brought into force in 1992. Plus, a protocol amending Hague-Visby popped up in 1979. So why does this timeline matter to you? Well, depending on where you are shipping to and from, one of these specific sets of rules will dictate exactly who opens their wallet if your inventory ends up at the bottom of the ocean.
Which brings us nicely to Section 3, expecting a seaworthy vessel, the carrier's core promise to you. No matter which rulebook applies, there is one absolute, unbreakable expectation here. The absolute crucial point here is this legal concept of due diligence. Before any voyage even begins, the very first legal liability of the carrier is to exercise due diligence to make that ship seaworthy. And look, this doesn't just mean the ship floats. It means the carrier has to prove the vessel is safe, properly equipped, adequately manned, and crucially, that its cargo holds are completely fit and safe to receive and preserve your specific type of goods. If they fail that basic test, they're on the hook. But Anne, this is a massive but. What happens when the carrier did provide a seaworthy vessel and things still go completely sideways? Welcome to Section 4, when carriers escape liability. The law actually includes a truly alarming list of exceptions. If your cargo is destroyed by an act of God or extreme perils of the sea, the carrier owes you absolutely nothing. Fire on board? Not their fault. Quarantine restrictions, unexpected strikes, violent riots? Totally exempt. Even if the ship sinks because they diverted course to save a life at sea, or because of some latent defect in the ship that a standard inspection couldn't catch, the carrier is protected. It really highlights the massive financial risks you are taking on from Mother Nature and civil unrest. And here is where we get to the real so what for your day-to-day operations. Pay close attention to those last exceptions on the legal list: insufficiency of packing and inadequacy of marking. This connects directly to your warehouse floor. If your team uses flimsy boxes, bad tape, or glazes over properly labeling fragile goods, and those goods break during a perfectly normal sea voyage, you eat the loss, literally. Poor packaging instantly negates any claim you might have against a multi-billion-dollar shipping line. So let's say you pack your goods flawlessly. You verify the carrier is top-notch. But what happens when the sea just doesn't cooperate? Or, honestly, worse, what happens when bad actors deliberately intervene in your supply chain? That brings us to Section 5, Navigating Frauds and Disasters. We've got to shine a light on the dark side of global shipping and these extreme scenarios. Believe it or not, outright maritime fraud is a massive issue globally. We are talking about literal phantom ships. These are vessels that load up your cargo, sail calmly out of port, secretly change their name, forge entirely new registration documents, and just completely vanish into the night to sell your inventory on the black market. It's wild. Because of these chilling threats, international bodies like the International Maritime Bureau stepped in. Conventions like the Suppression of Unlawful Acts, or the SUA Convention, were drafted specifically to fight back against organized maritime fraud, piracy, and violence at sea, just to try and safeguard these global trade routes. Let's move on to our final section, passenger rules and our summary. Sometimes, business owners or crew actually travel by sea alongside their goods, so we need to look at how humans are insured on the water. If you ever step foot on a commercial vessel as a passenger, your rights immediately shift under a totally different set of rules called the Athens Convention. This is the specific legal framework governing the carriage of passengers and their personal luggage by sea. It dictates exactly what the carrier's liability is for your physical safety, your life, and the suitcases you dragged on board. And here is a super interesting legal dynamic of the Athens Convention. If a shipwreck happens, say via a collision, stranding, explosion, or fire, and a passenger is injured or luggage goes missing, the law automatically presumes the carrier is at fault. The burden of proof lies entirely on them. To avoid massive financial penalties, the shipping line has to actively prove they didn't cause the incident, like they'd have to prove another ship crashed into them, for instance. However, don't get too comfortable because the Athens Convention has very strict limits. Carriers face absolutely zero liability for lost money, gold, or jewelry unless those specific items were explicitly deposited with the purser for safekeeping. And this brilliantly illustrates our core takeaway for today. Whether it is commercial cargo stacked high on a container ship or your personal wealth tucked away in a suitcase, declare it, document it, and secure it properly. Because if you don't play by the rulebook, the carrier owes you absolutely nothing. Wow, so we've covered a lot of ground today. Everything from contracts of affreightment to phantom ships and the absolute vital importance of just taping your boxes correctly. The ocean is an incredibly unpredictable place, both legally and physically. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought. Now that you know the hidden perils of the sea and the very strict limits of a carrier's liability, is your supply chain and your cargo truly protected? Take a really hard look at your shipping contracts today. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep learning.